Good morning. It is Tuesday, July the 2nd, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host. I'm Ronald T. Hardgrove, and my podcast can be heard on Spreaker.com. The email address is storytimes@hotmail.com, and it can be reached also on Twitter at Ronald Hardgrove, and my Facebook is, the Facebook page is at The Drill. So this is a podcast that's about true conservatism. I discovered on my political odyssey that what most people call conservatism isn't that at all. It's reactionary, traditionalist, but it has nothing to do with being a true conservative. But to be a true conservative, you've got to get to the essence of what conservatism is, and that is making the presumption for the status quo. And politically, being a conservative means conserving the neutrality of the government. So I have just two items today, so it's going to be a rather short podcast. Both of these items are about Rush Limbaugh. One of them is from his app, and then the other one is from the dust jacket of a book, sort of a biography of Rush Limbaugh from Zev Shafetz. So there we go. And so let me go ahead and start with the. This is a transcript. That's what it is from the Rush Limbaugh show from yesterday, and this is about Portland, the incident in Portland, Oregon.
So liberals hate you. They'll beat you up and spit on you in restaurants. This is a article on the Rush Limbaugh app from his show from yesterday, July 1st. So, Rush. Out in Portland, Oregon, contrast this with what happened in Covington, Kentucky. Here you have some innocent milk-drinking 17-year-olds who go out on a little field trip to Washington, D.C. They happen to be wearing Make America Great Again hats. They're 17 years old. They're wiry little teenagers here, and they're confronted by a militant Native American activist, Nathan something or other, who starts beating on his war drum. So one of these 17-year-old kids, Nick Sandman, just stands there and smiles so as not to be provocative, so as not to be seen as the cause of anything. And he gets the blame. He gets targeted and labeled as a snarky white supremacist Trump supporter, mocking and intimidating, and a frail and very weak, but fiercely loyal, Native American activist. It was 180 degrees wrong. The media embarrassed themselves with it. They went on and on and on about it, doing everything they could to destroy these kids who hadn't done anything. They were, in the common parlance, victims. Now, we go out to Portland this weekend. We have these Antifa people, and this is a totally misnamed group. Antifa means Antifa, anti-fascist. These people are just a bunch of domestic left-wing terrorists. They violently, militantly attack anybody who simply disagrees with them. If anything, what it does is illustrate my well-thought-out and vastly researched theorem that is us they hate. It is our existence they hate. It is the fact that we disagree and oppose them that they hate. They despise us. But this is a terrorist group that has gotten away with their label being anti-fascist, meaning they're anti-government. They're not that at all. They're very pro-government. If anything, they're pro-authoritarian. They're violent. They beat people up. They beat up a gay journalist and nobody condemned them. A bunch of left-wing radical terrorists beat up and then milkshake a gay journalist who's got to go to the hospital for a possible brain bleed, and what happens? The mayor of Portland essentially supports it. Because don't you know Trump hate? Don't you know it's all justified? Trump has changed the rules now. So all of these bastardizations of norms, they're perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable because of Trump hate. It's like Eric Trump Jr. got spat upon in a restaurant last week. Stephanie Wilkinson is the name of the woman who owns a restaurant in Lexington, Virginia, called The Red Hen. That's the place that refused to serve Sarah Sanders when she went in there last June. This is the place where Sarah Sanders was practically semi-violently booed and thrown out of the place and refused service. So this past Friday, the Washington Post ran a story in which this Stephanie Wilkinson is asked her thoughts on the recent spitting incident involving Eric Trump, and she lets it be known that she's perfectly for it. Why? She even understands it. You have to read a little bit of the story. It's not immediately learnable at the beginning of the story. She writes the piece, no one in the industry condones the physical assault of a patron. But then after that, this is what they all say. Nobody condones this, nobody would ever accept this, and then she goes on to justify it.
Okay, so that's about good enough. Actually, I went on for about 10 minutes reading that article, but I want to go ahead and make the point. That's giving you basically an idea of what he is saying is that these are things where the right, conservatives, Republicans have been treated wrongly. In one case, it was actually the journalist in Portland. Everybody assumes that he was a right wing, but according to it was Mr. Glenn Beck, is that the website he works for is actually a left wing website. And again, apparently, if it's true that he's gay, then you would expect that he would have a tendency to lean to the left. But in all other cases, in the case of the Red Rooster and in the case of what happened to the kids in New York, it was with the MAGA hats on. It was Republicans or apparent Republicans that were being mistreated. So what does Rush Limbaugh do in this particular instance? What does he do about it? And what's fascinating, let me preface what I'm about to say by saying so many times you hear the Republicans, the people on the radio, the Rush Limbaughs of the radio complain, that nobody seems to do anything. Nobody seems to care. And they can't figure it out. They can't understand. I'm here busting my ass 3 hours a day. Why doesn't anybody seem to care? And the reason that they don't care is because you don't provide, you don't move them. You don't move them. You don't make a value judgment. All of what he just did right now had no value judgment to it. Nowhere in that statement did he say that what happened to the journalist or to anybody else in there was wrong. Nowhere does he say it was wrong. He is making the mistake of, this is where he apes the left. Okay? And he refuses to make value judgments. Value judgments are at the core of being a conservative. You cannot be a conservative without making value judgments. You have to. And he fails to do so. And since he fails to make the value judgments, why should anybody get excited? And what he's doing is aping the left from the standpoint of using the left decades ago came out and said, hey, we're the news department, and what we're going to do is we're going to give you the facts, and we're going to let you decide. And that's what Rush Limbaugh's doing. Hey, I'm going to give you the facts and let you decide. And then he's puzzled. Well, I don't understand. I gave them the facts. Why aren't they upset? Why aren't they out in the street with pitchforks and torches and calling their representatives and getting active? Okay, and the reason is because you gave them the facts and let them decide for themselves. Instead of, I'm going to make a judgment. When you're doing this, I'm going to give you the facts and let you decide, you're conceding that everybody is different. That everybody is there's nothing in common. Human beings have absolutely nothing in common. Therefore, we cannot know ourselves, we cannot know each other, and we definitely can't judge each other. And that's wrong. There are reality is universal, knowledge is universal, ethics are universal. Okay, everybody, we all have things in common. That's the basis on which we judge. Now, that doesn't mean that we judge correctly all the time, but it is the basis on which we judge. That's what Rush Limbaugh should be doing here. He should be declaring immediately when the journalist got milkshaked, and again, I covered this yesterday. I told you what he was going to do with this story, and he did exactly what I expected him to do. He played it neutral. He tried to be Switzerland. There is no Switzerland. There is no neutrality. We're all human beings. We all know when somebody is being abused. Okay, and that's what happened here. This person got abused. We all know when somebody is being assaulted. We also know when somebody is breaking the law, as these black-clad punks were doing in Portland. They were breaking the law. So we don't need to pretend that we're neutral. We come out and say, hey, these thugs broke the law. They beat somebody up. They injured this individual. That's wrong. They have every right to protest. They have every right to freedom of speech, to come out in the streets and say what it is that they've got to say. They have no right to break the law. They have no right to assault people. What they did was wrong. It was unethical, it was immoral, and beyond that, it was repugnant, the way they did it. That's first thing. Second thing you should be doing is saying, and these are members of the left. Okay, this is what the left does, and that this is why we on the right, we conservatives, are better than they are. We are better people than they are. We have a better philosophy, core philosophy. We have a better political philosophy. We have a better outlook on life. And we are better than they are. This is why nobody should become a Democrat. This is why nobody should become a socialist. And why definitely nobody should become one of these black-clad thugs. Because they're despicable. And part of what makes them so despicable is the fact that they hide. The picture that I saw in the newspaper showed these folks, and they either had masks and sunglasses on, or they were wearing helmets with goggles, so they could not be identified, because they want to operate with impunity. Because each one of these people has a home. Maybe they live at home with mom, or maybe they live on their own, but they have a home, they have an address. And every one of them works. They have a place of business. Maybe they're self-employed, maybe they work for somebody else. What would happen if and if I was the President of the United States, I'd seriously consider, because you've got to figure somebody in the FBI or law enforcement knows who at least some of these folks are. What would it be like to unmask a few of these people? Put their pictures up on the news and say, guess what? See this guy over here with this mask? He is David Schwimmer or David Jones, and he is at 123 Maple Street, Portland, Oregon. That's where he lives, and he works at the local Home Depot. Why don't you stop by and say hi to him? How long do you think this Antifa crap would be going on? How long do you think how many of this group would be attracting people to come to its parties, so to speak? It wouldn't. It'd be over pretty quick. But the point is, again, we are better people than they are. We don't, when we want to make protests, we don't go to break up or destroy property, and we don't hit people over the head with 2x4s and create a milkshake with chunks of concrete in it to throw at people. We don't act violently, we don't assault, we don't break the law. We are better than they are. So when I come back, it's going to be round 2 of the Rush Limbaugh Day. So back, thank you very much. And I was looking through in the Amazon bookstore, and I came across a book that was kind of a biography, I guess, of Rush Limbaugh. And it was by Zev Chafetz, and I believe it's called Rush Limbaugh, An Army of One, something of that nature. So I was looking at the blurbs for it. I guess it would be from the back of the book. And the one that was giving a description of what the contents were, because I wanted to see if this is a book I wanted to sample, or if maybe I want to go ahead and buy it. So I was reading the blurb, and I thought this is perfect illustration of one of the things that I'm talking about in terms of the influence of left-wing counterculture in this country. So here we go.
Limbaugh is a complicated man. There's some Sunday school boy in him. Let's try it again. Rush Limbaugh is a complicated man. There's some Sunday school boy in him over from the Centenary Methodist Church in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and a touch of Hugh Hefner's Playboy Club, some of Bo Diddley's swaggering guitar mixed with William F. Buckley's drawing room harpsichord. Rush is an introvert with 40 guests for dinner on Thanksgiving, a cynical romantic who doesn't understand women but keeps on trying, a polite, soft-spoken listener who, on the air, aims rude, sometimes vulgar, personal insults at his ideological enemies, a sophisticated political satirist whose own taste in humor runs to corny mother-in-law jokes. He's a conservative revolutionary, the inventor of the talkback radio industry, a school-hating college dropout who turned into a weapon of mass instruction. There probably isn't another man on planet Earth whose role models and heroes include Ronald Reagan, Muhammad Ali, James Madison, Larry Superjock Lujack, Justice Antonin Scalia, and Professor Irwin Corey. And let me see, this is from the back of the book called Rush Limbaugh, An Army of One by Zev Shafetz.
So that was, The Army of One by Zev Shafetz. Now, what was interesting about this is one of the games that the left likes to play in selling subjective metaphysics, the idea that there isn't one reality that we all experience, but that each person has their own separate reality, and this is how they sell that. And what they do is they say, oh, everybody is complicated. And they're complicated, so you really can't understand them. And if you can't understand somebody, you can't judge them. Okay? So we're all complicated. Nobody can really understand themselves. They can't understand each other. And so therefore we shouldn't be judging one another. And that's where you get, and if you don't judge one another, who wins there? Socialism. Socialism, subjected to reason, subjected to judgment, loses every single time. The only way socialism can win is if you can find a way to suspend people's judgment. And this is the way they do it. So how do they create complication? Well, what they do is they take differing parts of your personality or differing activities, and they try to clash them together. On the one hand, they said that he was a schoolboy or a church boy from Cape Girardeau, but on the other hand, he's a playboy. He's got a little bit of the Playboy Club in him, and that on the one hand, he says very vulgar things on the radio, but his own he's a sophisticated satirist on the radio, but his own personal jokes, taste in jokes, run to corny mother-in-law jokes. So you have all these things, and the way the author is presenting it, that looks like they're contradictions. Wow, he's just a mass of contradictions. No, there's no contradiction to any of those things. Okay, the author is trying to make it look that way. He doesn't, and by the way, you notice the author doesn't explicitly come out and say, Rush Limbaugh is full of contradictions. He uses a more vague term, complicated. He's complicated. We're all complicated. Crap. That's what that is, crap. The fact of the matter is that I can go to church on Sunday, and then I can on Monday, or after I'm out of church, I can go home and playboy it up in my house behind closed doors. There's no conflict there. Okay? And then I can also it's called appropriateness, and that's what he's ducking here to try to make this look like there's something complicated or contradictory going on. Is it appropriate to be Hugh Hefner in church? No. Is it appropriate to bring the church into your bedroom? No. Is it appropriate for or perhaps a good idea for Rush Limbaugh to do his corny mother-in-law jokes on his radio show? No. Is it appropriate for him to be vulgar when he's out in public takes his wife out for dinner or something of that nature? No. So it's a question of appropriateness. It's like I was thinking the other day, I was driving, and in one situation, somebody was trying to get into my lane, and I sped up and didn't allow them to get into the lane. Later on, somebody else wanted to try to squeeze into the lane. I stopped and let them in. So on the surface, it would appear to be a contradiction, that I'm just operating on a whim all the time, but it's not. It's not an issue. That's an issue of appropriateness and judgment. And the same thing with the Rush Limbaugh situations. You can question my judgment. You can say, well, you know what? When you cut that other person off, you shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. It was bad. And we can have that discussion. You can also say that when you stopped and let that other person in, you shouldn't have done that. And again, we could have that debate or argument about that. But what we cannot have the debate or argument about is the issue of appropriateness itself. You cannot come out and just simply ignore the context of each one of those situations. And the same thing that goes with Rush Limbaugh. He's making a judgment call as what to do, when to do it. Now, is it appropriate for him? Is it a good idea for him? Is he exercising good judgment when he's vulgar on the radio? That's a subject for potential subject for debate. Is it appropriate or right for him, or is it in good taste to be telling corny mother-in-law jokes when he's at home? Again, that's something that you could discuss. But to simply pretend that standards don't exist, what is appropriate doesn't exist, and that we clash everything or take different situations, put them together in such a way as to make them look like a contradiction so that we can pretend people are complicated and are therefore judgment-proof is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. We have a common reality, we have common knowledge, and we have common ethics. And because of that, we can know ourselves, we can know each other, and we can exercise adequate and good judgment. So that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.